Can you tell us sort of how it was that you made the transition from sports into politics?
I mean, like a lot of things, it wasn't necessarily planned so much in advance. It just kind of happened. But part of it was that, what we did in baseball at Baseball Perspectives, a lot of it was kind of understanding that the conventional wisdom is exemplified by kind of the mainstream media wasn't always very bright. They weren't really telling you how baseball games are actually won and lost, and a lot of it was about this kind of, narrative like, oh, clubhouse leadership and blah blah blah, momentum, which really doesn't mean all that much. Where if you break down the numbers, the bottom line is you got to put guys on base and have guys who can drive them home. And people were kind of missing that. They were trying to tell too many stories. And I think likewise, getting into the campaigns and really 2007, watching MSNBC or CNN or Fox News, just not seeing a lot of sophistication with the way that numbers were handled, where everything was about momentum and storylines, blah, 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 and they weren't really kind of being they weren't really looking at the numbers scientifically, but they were looking at them as a way to kind of tell their kind of prefabricated stories about how the campaign was going. And so it was that same frustration where, like, gosh, if we could improve the tone of coverage in baseball, then there's the same opportunity kind of squared, really, in politics, potentially.
Right. Now, when you did make that transition, did you expect 538 to be so popular and so successful?
No, I mean, it was, I tend to be an optimist by nature, and I thought we kind of had a little bit of a market niche, but, it kept multiplying and multiplying, and internet traffic, I mean, the way it works, you don't go from having necessarily 1,000 hits a day to having 2,000. You go from 1,000 to 10,000. It's kind of a geometric multiplier. We had that happen, a few times over. So by election day, we had, I think, 3 million people looking at the site. Most of them have been lost now, but that was an enormous, ridiculous number. We never expected it to do that well, certainly.
Right. Now, have you been able to sort of drag people along from the sports area into like more of a political world?
I think there's a fair amount of overlap in kind of numbers junkies in general, especially in baseball. There seems to be kind of a tradition of whether it's a kind of George F. Will or like a Keith Olbermann or people who are baseball fans who kind of, you have to have a lot of patience to be a baseball fan. The season plays itself out over 162 games, and teams will go through bad stretches. Same likewise, if you're going to be a fan, quote unquote, of politics, you have to be really really patient, because every candidate, every party has down cycles. It takes a long time for things to get resolved. So temperamentally, I think there's some kind of a parallel there.